Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Jeffica YouTube channel. Today we're going to be going over what I think is one of the most fascinating games in this SCL so far. At least DOU-wise, because I don't really play any other tiers. But, so, Anne versus Madara. This is week 5 of SCL. I think this is the Silver Foxes versus I don't know the team names. I'm going to be honest. So we have a look at the teams here. This is an Earthworm mirror, which is pretty wild. We've definitely seen a lot of Earthworm usage this SCL. I believe Nails and Bagel have both loaded Worm. I think Nails loaded it week 2, and Bagel loaded it this week as well, but he loaded it earlier in the week than Ann did. But I do think it's interesting that we've seen a lot of Earthworm this SCL. I think we've seen this structure a lot specifically. So normally this is Terrablast on Bagel's version. It was Terrablast Flying EQ DD Dragonite, whereas on Nail's version, it was Scale Shot. So it'll be interesting to see what the Dragonite set is. It'll also be interesting to see something that'll come up later is the Chien-Pao 4th move. Which I'll explain why in a little bit. Also, the Gouging Fire set will be very interesting because, Breaking Swipe goes very hard into this entire team. But also, if you look at both of the Gouging Fires here, their Heat Crashes are going to be thudding into the opposing Earthworm. So it'll be very interesting to see how the Earthworm is navigated in each of these different matchups, because if you look at Anne's team, she does not have many superb ways to hit the Earthworm, especially if this POW is not Sacred Sword. If you look at Madara's team, he at least has the hands, which is more than Anne can say, at the very least, right? Being able to hit Earthworm with a stab super effective move is very good for Madara here. If we're looking at the matchup here, realistically, it depends. I like Madara's matchup a bit because I think this Iron Hands is a very good matchup here. If he can destabilize the Gouger and prevent it from just sticking on the field forever, then his hands will be in a very, very good spot. It also depends on if it's AV. It also could be SD. I think SD would have a great time breaking here, but we do have to be careful of a possible DD multi-scale Earthquake D-Knight. Hazards in this game will also play a really important role, because if we look at this, the Chien-Pao Sashes and the Gouging Fire HP is really important for both players. Preserving the Chien-Pao Sash is very important. It's less important for Madara, because Madara at any point will be able to bring in Sinistra and restore his POW to Sash. We'll also see, the Chien-Paos, it really does matter a lot if either Chien-Pao has Sacred Sword, because if either Chien-Pao has Sacred Sword, it's able to hit both the Earthworm and the opposing Chien-Pao for super effective damage. So I'm going to start the replay. I think this is a very interesting game. We're going to get into why it's so interesting a bit later on. And if you've watched the game, you already kind of know why. This is a bit of an infamous replay, I think. But okay, so first term, we see Chien-Pao Wellspring into Earthworm and Landorus. The immediate Intimidate from Madara is really good here, I think. If you look at this team, nothing really likes being intimidated, especially if it's multi-scale D-Knight. And as we'll soon see, this is Choice Scarf Landorus, which means it's pretty easily able to just pivot out and get the Intim down for free. So this is this Landorus is a very heads-up lead for Madara, I think. Especially because if you can nail this POW with a U-turn, then you're already breaking its Sash, which makes it much less useful later on. Also, both of these Mons, if it's not immediately Sacred Sword POW, which even then, you're probably not clicking Sacred Sword into this Earthworm on turn 1 just for it to shed Tail out. This is a very dominant lead, I think, for Madara. The Landorus being Scarf here is so good for him, because it means he's allowed to actually, he's able to actually pivot it out for free without having to, completely commit to a hard switch. So let's see what happens here. Earthworm comes in, which makes a lot of sense because you don't want to catch the U-turn into the POW. You want to preserve its stash. Madara makes a very heads-up play here, and he actually U-turns the Ogre Pawn, dealing a massive chunk, revealing that this Landorus is Scarf for Anne, which this is a big piece of information for Anne, because now she knows that she has to chip this Landorus a fuck ton. She has to kill this Landorus. Otherwise, it will just, like, knock her... It'll U-turn out on her Gen POW, and it will break her stash for basically free. So, U-turn comes out, and this Ogre Pawn here reveals Taunt, which is really big. This is a big turn for Ant, because it means she's able to actually, like, prevent this Orthworm from getting a sub up. And the Orthworm not getting a sub here is really big, because it means she's not able to get in, Madara's not able to get in, like, some of the things you really want behind a sub here. Like, Iron Hands behind a sub here goes unbelievably hard into Ant's team. There's, like, really nothing that can destabilize and dislodge it, especially if the Gouger is not able to, like, actually breaking swipe it down, because behind sub, it won't get the attack drop, right? So that means that this Gouging Fire will just be able to sit on the field, but it won't actually be able to really pressure the hands at all, especially because hands is so heavy. So getting a sub up for the Iron Hands would be really big for Madara. So blocking that with the taunt is really, really good for Anne, even though you have to take the U-turn on the Ogre Pawn. I think overall, Anna's definitely a little bit behind just because of how well Madara led. However, she still has a lot of avenues back into the game. That taunt keeps her from getting too much farther behind, because now her Orthworm is in a prime spot to get her own sub up. She does have to be careful of a possible body press. It really does depend on the Orthworm speed matchup here. They could be tying, which would be kind of bad for Anne, because if they tie and Madara wins the tie, I'm not sure. I don't think Heat Crash plus Body Press will do enough into Anne's Orthworm to get it out of Shed Tail range even after Citrus Berry. It surely won't, because I believe Heat Crash is 40 base power into Orthworm. However, that would still be a pretty... Like, getting the Citrus Berry for free means that this Orthworm is at, like, what, 32, give or take? And means it's probably either in Gouger at +1 range, or maybe even Gouger with Sword range, which is really bad for Anne, because this Orthworm is very good defensively here. This Scarf Landorus is very scary late game if the Orthworm gets chipped. So overall, very good turn for Madara, very good lead for Madara, and did a very good play to keep her in the game. So we'll see this next turn. Orthworm, it tried to Rocks there. Rocks would have been very big. Like preventing the Rocks there, or I was expecting the Shed Tail, but like preventing the Rocks also is equally as big. Like making sure that this POW is coming in full. This possible multi-scale D-Knight is coming in at full. This Gouging Fire is coming in at full. Like, Rocks go really, really stupid into these three very important mons for Anne, so preventing the Rocks there is huge. Alright, so we see Ting Lu come in for the Ogre Pawn, which makes sense, because you really want to preserve the Ogre Pawn there. Shed Tail comes out, so either Anne's Orthworm is faster, or it won the speed tie. That's actually a really important turn. We see the Orthworm gets 4% above 50, so it will actually be able to live in Shed Tail out again. I doubt it will get the chance to, but it is a possibility, which is good to know. And then the Orthworm doesn't break the Gouging Fire sub, so now this Gouging Fire behind sub is low-key a little bit scary. This is a really good board state for Anne. This turn worked out really well for her, because basically now she has Gouging Fire behind a sub, which is able to just start clicking Breaking Swipe into this entire team, basically without consequences, because it either hits everything with Breaking Swipe or Heat Crash, except for this opposing Gouging Fire if it were to Terra. And now this Lu is able to just kind of sit on the field, and it's able to click hazards into Madara. So it was a very heads-up play from Anne, getting the Gouging Fire in for free. And I don't know if she like put some speed creep on the Orthworm. I don't know if she would have. I don't know if it's necessarily something you would consider in the builder, because, like, realistically, are you really expecting to go into the Orthworm mirror? Probably not, right? So it's either speed creeped a little bit or she won the tie. And either way, winning that, like, being faster on her Orthworm puts her in a very positive spot here. But this also being Scarf Landorus means that this could be very, like okay, so something I see that could happen here. If it's Scarf Landorus on an Orthworm team, it probably has Earthquake, or it might have Earthquake. So something I could see here is a Madara clicking Earthquake, getting the break on the sub for the Gouging Fire for free, only taking a little bit of chip due to the only taking a little bit of chip due to the, what's called? Breaking Swipe after this turn. And then it's able to get some, like, recovery on the Orthworm for free. But, so let's see how the rest of this turn goes out. Engine comes out on the Ting Lu. We see a Howl. There's a very heads-up Howl here, like, acknowledging that realistically the Madara doesn't have many ways of actually breaking this Gouging Fire sub, unless this is, which it definitely could be, like, since it didn't reveal Booster Energy, by the way, since, I guess I didn't address this already, but since this Gouging Fire didn't reveal Booster Energy speed, we do have to be wary of the fact that it could be Earthquake, especially next to Orthworm and Landorus T. Like, Earthquake is a little bit scary here for Anne, I would say, because it's able to break the Gouging Fire sub, which leaves it somewhat vulnerable to Lando next turn. It's able to prevent, like, it's able to get some chip on this Ting Lu, which does matter in the long term, right? Because it means that it might be closer to Iron Hand's range. We'll see how the rest of this turn goes out. There's the Earthquake revealed from Madara. That's really big because it means he's actually able to break. He's actually able to break this sub. The rocks do go up, which is pretty big here, because it does mean that the Pow's Sash is broken. Although this is less big for Madara again because of the Sinistra. Breaking Swipe comes out. It's revealed to be not Clear Amulet, by the way, but Covert Cloak Gouging Fire. Because if it was Clear Amulet, it would have said that it blocked the stat drop. So this is just Covert Cloak Gouging Fire, which is really interesting. Actually, I think that's a very cool tech from Madara. So we see get some light chip on this Ting Lu from the Landorus, which is really good. It's probably in Iron Hand's range now. We see a Dragon Dance from this Gouging Fire as Madara, as Anne clicks Ruination down into this Orthworm. That was a really good Ruination. Getting that chip on, like, I will say Ruination is, like, basically uncontested into Madara's team. Like, there's no reason. It's pretty much a free click. I think something that could have been a little bit heads up was a Whirlwind into the Gouging Fire, because the setup on the Gouging Fire is kind of free for Madara here. If you don't Whirlwind. But I do understand the need to get Ruination, or to get chip on either the Orthworm coming in or on the Landorus. Because, again, the Landorus is very, very good into hand late game. But now this Orthworm has consumed its Citrus Berry. We see the Terra Fairy come out from Gouging Fire. This means that Madara's Gouging Fire completely walls Anne's Gouging Fire. I will say, though, I won't say this is preemptive. I will just say that against a possible Whirlwind Ting Lu, I think committing this hard to the Gouging Fire early game might be a bit of a mistake. Because now, what's probably going to happen this turn is the Ting Lu is going to end up Whirlwinding the Gouging Fire at the end of the turn. So it's going to come in at like 53%. And unless you can position Matcha around very well, it's likely going to stay there. You know, I mean, okay, I will say, having Matcha means that, like, it is a lot easier for Madara to reposition and to get health back on his mods. Like, this could just very well go unpunished, and he could very well just get a free Earthquake on, chip the Ting Lu even more. I don't think it probably doesn't OHKO the opposing Gouging Fire, but it almost certainly does, like, a good 75%. And getting this Orthworm basically back to full is really good here. I will say, this is still a very good turn, progress-wise, for Madara. So let's see. Yep, there goes the Earthquake. It is faster than the opposing Gouging Fire, and that only does 50. That's a crazy amount. But I guess it's non-stab Earthquakes. This does make sense. This being Terra Fairy here makes a lot of sense, because if you look at this team, where's the Regidrago matchup? like Orthworm is your only resist, and realistically, that's if you look at base special defense stat, that's not a real Regidrago resist. So I think Terra Fairy on this Gouge makes a lot of sense. It also makes sense a lot. It's very good in this matchup, because now this Gouging Fire cannot touch you at all. So we'll see what happens this turn. Heat Crash, just chipping down the Orthworm a little bit. Good for Anne here for sure. There's the rocks. Okay, that's a big rocks from Madara. And we also see the Whirlwind come out. So, if you're Madara, I think the mon you want to see come out here is probably the Landorus. Landorus means you can come in, you can click, if it has it, you can click Earthquake. Chip this Ting Lu down even more, get your Earthworm back to full, probably kill this Gouging Fire. I would imagine so, since it is stab. And Landorus is really strong, especially in comparison to Gouging Fire. You can get this Orthworm back to full, and then possibly get a Shed Tail out into someone like Iron Hands, which seems very threatening here. Although, that can get punished pretty easily by this Ting Lu. So I think a play I might like to see here from Madara is Earthquake plus Body Press into the Ting Lu. I'm not sure if that would KO exactly, but it would prevent you from losing too much momentum on a Whirlwind. So let's see what happens here. Okay, he's the exact one that he wants. That's actually really good for him here. Yeah, especially if this is EQ. If this is not EQ, it's less good, because it means you have to either commit to Stomping Tantrum into this Gouging Fire that can possibly Burning Bulwark, and you're not able to heal the Earthworm, and you're not able to chip the Ting Lu probably into Body Press range. So it really does come down to if this Landers is Earthquake here. And we see, both players making very good use of their timer here. Both are down to 150 seconds. They're taking their time here. They're thinking about their moves. This is going to become important later. Now we see this turn. Anna's getting a little low on timer. She's thinking a lot. This is a pretty awkward position for her. I can't blame her at all. And we also see that the Gouging Fire goes before the Landers. This is definitely Jolly Gouging Fire. So it's probably Adamant Landers, which makes sense here. The Landers just keeps getting chipped down little by little. What do we see here? We see, okay, it is Earthquake. So this Earthworm is still getting rejuvenated. This is probably not going to KO the Gouge because it is at -1. Yup, just barely misses the KO. Oh, and we see Citrus Berry Ting Lu. Okay, wow. That's really good for Anne here. Uh-oh. I'm not sure I liked that Shed Tail from Madara here. I think it means that, I would, if I'm Anne here, I'm clicking Whirlwind into that slot every time. Yup, yeah, exactly. So I think, I'm not the biggest fan of that, Shed Tail. I think you needed to chip the Ting Lu with Body Press in order to not lose as much progress in this game. Oh, and we see the Gouging Fire pulled out there too, so it takes another round of rocks. It also means that this Landers is in a really awkward position because it is locked into Earthquake, because this is almost certainly Choice Scarf. And it means this Gouging Fire is able to get some damage off for free into either slot, really. Yeah, that's not a great pull for that's a pretty bad pull for Madara, although I don't necessarily think there were many good pulls for Madara. I guess if it was back into Earthworm, it would have been a decent pull, but other than that, yeah. We see the Hospitality come out into Landorus. Just a huge chunk from this Heat Crash. Now, something I want to note. This Landorus is said to be at 13%. This Landorus dies to Stealth Rock. Because of the rounding, it displays as 13%, but actually, according to Madara himself, this Landorus is in range of Stealth Rock, which is huge for both players, I think. Because now it means that one of the primary threats for Anne late game has been chipped into Stealth Rock range, meaning it can't actually threaten a whole lot late game. And another thing is that now Madara has a free sack for momentum. So this could be either very good for Madara or very good for Anne. But it is a very interesting dynamic for both players. But I will say, I think this mid game has been overall a bit worse for Madara. I think he hasn't done a very good job of maintaining the advantage he had from lead. I think he definitely has matchup here between the Landorus and the Iron Hands and the Terra Fairy DD Gouging Fire. However, I think he is pretty heavily disadvantaged, or he's not disadvantaged now, but he's definitely in a worse spot than he was a couple turns ago. I think the problem here was, I believe it was this turn. No, not this turn. It was this turn. I think that Shed Tail really cost Madara a lot. The Shed Tail, rather than the Body Press, just meant that he lost 50% on Earthworm only to get Whirlwinded out and then take additional chip on both your Sinistcha, your Earthworm, and your Iron Hands for basically no reason. I think this was probably where I think Madara lost a lot of his advantage here. And Anna's just playing very solidly, very consistently. She's doing what she needs to get back in the game. But that was definitely a bit of a weird turn from Madara. Okay, I'm going to go back to where we were. So we see the Sinistcha switch in. Lando heals. Lander takes a bunch. It's in Stealth Rock range, just to, like, we see this. Okay, yeah, so I was sorry, I thought the Ting Lu clicked Earthquake for a second. I'm stupid. Yeah, so we see the Earthquake come out. Gouging Fire finally dies, but I would definitely say Anne got a lot of value out of this Gouging Fire over the course of the game. It does mean that the Sinistra has one less mon that can actually hit it. The Ruination will help hurt it, but this Sinistra could be very annoying late game. We see a Whirlwind again. Okay, so it pulls the Iron Hands, which is a good, I will say, that's a good pull for Mod right here. We see Anne's timer getting really low. This is looking a little it's a little scary for Anne. We see, but yeah, the Iron Hands getting pulled in here is very good. This Iron Hands is a very dominant position. If this is Ice Punch Iron Hands, it basically hits the entire team, especially because this Ogerpon is so low after after the chip it got earlier in the game. The problem here now is that your Landorus is locked into EQ, and it dies to rocks. So basically, you're going to have to switch. Oops. Basically, you're going to have to switch your Landorus out here if you don't want to make your Iron Hands take a bunch of chip, or you're going to have to like sack your Landorus for not much. But I don't think there's a reason to keep Landorus. I think you just take it out, right? Because I guess no, yeah, because you don't want to give Anne free chip on your Iron Hands realistically, like, or your Earthworm for that matter. Like, I guess you probably could stay at an EQ to get some more health on the Earthworm and just, like, but the problem, I guess it's fine, right? Like, unless there's okay. Realistically, if you're Anne, you're probably clicking. I don't know. I think you probably click Ivy Cudgel plus Ruination into hands. Realistically, this is probably just since this is taunt, it most likely dropped not follow. It most likely dropped a grass move for that. Meaning yeah, so it most likely dropped grass move, which is pretty important here because if this is like, well, it should okay, yeah, it's it'll come up. It may come up later. I don't know. But the Ogerpon dropped grass move. I think I got a little ahead of myself there. But the Ogerpon probably dropped grass move for taunt. I feel like realistically for Anne, you can probably just double the Iron Hands with like Ruination plus Ivy Cudgel because you guarantee getting chip on this Iron Hands is really good for like Chen Pao and Dragonite late game, and also this Ting Lu in the meantime. So let's see what happens here. Let's see how Madara like navigates the situation because this is a little bit odd. Even though he has the mod advantage, it's still a little bit like, okay, so we Hospitality the Iron Hands back to full, which makes sense because it covers for a possible Ivy Cudgel into the Landorus slot. Ivy Cudgel gets revealed. There's exactly. Ivy Cudgel Ruination comes out into this hand. This hand is a little bit. This hand's scarily low. It does get a lot of HP back off of the Ting Lu, but okay, let me like think about this for a little bit. Ivy Cudgel did 30 to hands. Okay, so even like Terra Cudgel with Pow almost certainly KOs, right? So if this is like, it depends on the Sinistra Terra. Madara can definitely Terra the Sinistra. No, he can't Terra actually. Never mind. So this is a bit of a weird spot. He can definitely, Anne can definitely bring in Chen Pao here. Ice move the Sinistra or Throat Chop it if it has it, and KO it, and then Terra Water Cudgel the Iron Hands. I think that's basically riskless. I don't think Madara actually has many switch-ins to Terra Water Cudgel. However, he could just sack the Landorus here, realistically, right? Because, okay, here's what you can do. The Sinistra, I don't think you really have any switch-ins to Chen Pao at this point. You could, I think you could probably go Earthworm on the Sinistra slot and sack the Landorus to Terra Water Cudgel. The Earthworm, now that the Ting Lu is dead, is a maybe not the Earthworm. The Earthworm is good to wall the Dragonite if it is like Terra Blast EQ, because it will just wall it completely. So maybe, what do you sack here if you're Madara? This is a good question. I think you. Okay, yeah, no, you sack the Sinistra for sure. You sack probably Sinistra and Landorus. You just leave Sinistra in, sack it to the Pow, and sack Landorus, I think. But we'll see what happens. And it is getting very low in time. Yep, okay, there's the Chen Pao. And from there, she loses. She times out. This is the second time this has happened this tour. She keeps getting lower and lower and lower in timer. She times out. That's it. That's the game. And Madara wins. So now that I've already done all of this pre-analysis on this position, I'm going to talk about how both players can win this. Because I definitely think it is super winnable for both players. Anne still has her Terra. I think the best move from Anne probably here is just Icicle Crash, or I would assume it's Icicle Crash or Ice Spinner. And then Terra Water Cudgel to Iron Hands. There are no real switches to Terra Water Ivy Cudgel other than Sinistra, which will die to the Chen Pao and is on the field. Madara does not have his Terra. Madara is not able to actually Terra, and like if this is Iron Hand, is Terra Water. It's not able to actually Terra into resist because the Scouting Fire is so low. Basically, if you're Anne, you have to get every turn right at this point. So I would say Anne is actually not, like, it definitely is very winnable for Anne. This is what it's going to come down to. At the end of the day, this will most likely come down to a Chen Pao speed die. And this will also come down to what is the Chen Pao set. Now, if this is Sacred Sword Chen Pao on Anne's side, she's actually able to pick off Madara's Chen Pao. Maybe not before it can move, but she is actually able to pick it off. Whereas if it's Icy Wind, the Chen Pao is basically going to wall the other Chen Pao. Same thing goes for Madara's Chen Pao. The thing I will say about Madara's Chen Pao is that Madara is very known for Icy Wind Chen Pao. I would not say he was necessarily, I don't recall if he was one of the people who popularized it per se, but he definitely was a very significant proponent of Icy Wind Chen Pao. He's been chronically spamming that thing. So if this is Icy Wind Chen Pao for Madara, I would definitely say he's a lot worse off here. And the fact that Anne still has her Terra, so realistically, she doesn't necessarily need to commit it to Ogerpon here, although I think you probably do. I think committing Terra to Ogerpon is probably correct here. Realistically, if you're Anne, you... Okay, let me game this out a little bit. You Icicle Crash the Sinistra, you Terra Water Ivy Cudgel the Iron Hands. Okay, we got that out of the way. What is Madara doing here in this position? Madara has to sack the Landorus on one of these slots, for sure. You definitely can't just let the Ogerpon get a Terra Water Ivy Cudgel off for free. So most likely what you have to do here, the mon you need the most in this endgame is probably Iron Hands and Chen Pao. Possibly Gouging Fire if you can somehow get into a position to get a DD up. But I think it's looking kind of unlikely. Also, if this Gouging Fire does not have a Dragon move last, if it's not... It actually could be 3 attacks Gouging Fire, because it is Covert Cloak, right? So if this is 3 attacks Gouging Fire and it somehow gets a DD up, and Madara can probably seal this out. We'll also note that because the rocks went up on Anne's side, her Earthworm is no longer able to get a Shed Tail off, which I don't think it would have come up realistically. I don't think any of these mons would have given Anne the free turns to get the Shed Tail. I think clicking Body Press usually have more value, but it is something to note. It's a really, really hairy endgame for both. I definitely think I've seen people say that Madara guaranteed won this. I don't know if he could have. I don't think there is necessarily a guaranteed line that can win Madara this game. It really depends so much on the Chen Pao moves and who Anne decides to Terra. Okay, so I'm going to take this into I think there's 3 or 4 scenarios. First scenario, both Chen Pao have Sacred Sword. This game is most definitely, unless Madara or Anne is able to absolutely just misplace, or is able to completely opposition the other, this will most likely come down to a Chen Pao speed die. If one of them is Icy Wind, it very much depends. If Anne's Pao is Icy Wind here, I would actually still say it's not bad for her, realistically, because she would still need to win the speed tie though. Okay, because let me game this out a little bit. You swap Iron Hands into Landorus, and you sack the Landorus. Okay. You you don't sack the Orthworm here for sure. You might actually sack the Gouging Fire. I think the Gouging Fire might be a bit of a liability in this endgame, and you really want the Hospitality onto the Iron Hands and the Ogerpon Ivy Cudgel resist late game. So I think you probably sack Gouging Fire here. So you go from Iron Hands into Landorus, sack it to get the free switch, and then you go Sinistra into Gouging Fire, sack it to Ivy Cudgel plus, or what's it called? Ice Move plus Ivy Cudgel. Probably Terra Ivy Cudgel, if I would have to guess. Unless this is like maybe Terra Steel on the Dragonite. That actually could be pretty big here. But it depends. So that means that you get in Chien-Pao and you get in probably Iron Hands, right? Because this guy's dead, this guy is dead. Realistically, at that point, it will come down to speed tie. If Ans is Icy Wind, it will be, and it wins the tie. It will be able to Icy Wind down the Madara's Chien-Pao and allow Ogerpon to pick up the KO on it. However, this will allow Iron Hands to get the Drain Punch into Ans Chien-Pao and probably heal back all the way to full, which is very good for Madara here. I actually don't know if Anne can break the Iron Hands after that happens, especially once the Sinistra comes in and is able to actually redirect the Ogerpon and all. Yeah, okay. So if Anne's Chien-Pao is Icy Wind, she almost certainly loses. Okay, so that's scenario 1. Scenario 2. Anne's Chien-Pao is Sacred Sword. If Anne's Chien-Pao is Sacred Sword and she wins the tie, no, she's still good. Wait, no, she's not. She's not good. Never mind, I'm stupid. Because the Pow takes rocks, so the Sash is broken. If Anne's Sacred Sword is Pow's Sacred Sword and it wins the tie, it will be able to KO Madara's Chien-Pao, and then Ogerpon will be able to get the Ivy Cudgel off with Sword of Ruin, and that will almost certainly KO the Iron Hands. If Madara's is Icy Wind, what he's able to do, and he wins the tie, what he is able to do is, if he clicks, he's able to, okay, well, actually, I don't know, okay, Madara, if you're Icy Wind here, it depends. You might not even click it if you're Icy Wind here. You might just go after the Ogerpon and Drain Punch, and just hope you win the tie. Like, I think you can probably just sucker Ogerpon and Drain Punch. Realistically, then, something you could do as Anne in that situation is you could follow me on Ogerpon to like cock block the Sucker Punch, make sure that the Drain Punch only goes into the Ogerpon, while the Chien-Pao is able to either Sacred Sword the opposing Chien-Pao or Icy Wind for the Dragonite. That'd be an interesting decision here for sure. Like, at the end of the day, this entire endgame comes down to the Chien-Pao sets and the Chien-Pao speed tie. Because if one Pow wins the speed tie, it usually puts the player that wins the speed tie into a better position. There are a couple positions in which case, like Madara will just guarantee the win. I would definitely say this is probably 60-40 in Madara's favor. Like, having this Chien-Pao, preserving the Sinistra, having them hands and preserving the Sinistra, especially in the face of what I would assume is probably an Ogerpon Terra. I don't necessarily think you can afford to save it for, like, anything else. I guess you can probably just double the hands raw in this position. But if you do that, I don't know. It's such a complicated position in this endgame. I cannot blame Anne at all for running out of timer. This is just such a like bizarre situation. The thing is also, Anne knows what her Chien-Pao moveset is. We don't know it. I can talk about this position probably for a good 30 more minutes. And still, I can't map out all of the lines because Madara just has so many possible tools and so many possible plays that he can make here. Whereas, and Anne also does. And the amount of permutations that can happen based off of just the Chien-Pao set is, like, staggering. Because, you know, you can have so many different scenarios of which Chien-Pao wins the speed tie. What are the Chien-Pao's movesets? Like, is this Is one of them Ice Shard Chen Pao? Is one of them Sucker Punch Chen Pao? Is it no priority on Madara's Chen Pao? I actually think, realistically, if I'm looking at Madara's team, I think you would probably be Icy Wind on this team because it is Iron Hands. Like, I think the Icy Wind next to the slow Gouging Fire and the Iron Hands makes a lot of sense because realistically, outside of the Sinistra, I think you appreciate the extra speed control. Whereas on Ans, I don't see anything you really want the Icy Wind for. Like, if the Dragonites get speed set, this Dragonite will probably have a speed move of its own, or a speed boosting move of its own, whether it be like Tailwind, or Scale Shot, or Dragon Dance, or some permutation of those three, right? Ogerpon definitely appreciates Icy Wind for opposing Ogerpons and, like, you know, for hitting opposing Chen Pao on the switch in or whatever, right? But I think overall, you would prefer to hit stuff like, you know, the Worm. You would prefer to hit stuff like King Gambit with this team. I'm not sure. King Gambit's not really relevant, but that's besides the point. That's for the record. I mean, King Gambit not being relevant in this tier is why part of the reason why Sacred Sword has fallen off. But more so opposing Chen Pao, right? Because if you look at this team, like opposing Chen Pao can be very annoying for this team. Like, it's able to, if it wins the speed tie versus Pao, it's able to outspeed most of the team. It's able to output obviously a lot of damage into the team, especially after the Gouging Fire goes down or the Orth Group gets shipped. So I think most likely it's Sacred Sword on Anne's Chen Pao and Icy Wind on Madara's Chen Pao. However, I could be completely wrong because there are entirely valid reasons to use Icy Wind and Sacred Sword on both teams. So yeah, this has been, I think this is one of the most interesting games in that I've watched as far as the DOU games in SCL go, just because there's so many different interesting things that can go on with this Pao interaction. Chen Pao has become like genuinely one of the strongest mons in DOU recently, just because of the innovation of these Icy Wind sets. Like this ability for, like if Madara is able to get into a position where it's Icy Wind hands, or it's Icy Wind Pao and hands, he will literally be able to Icy Wind this Ogerpon and kill it with the hands afterwards. It's able to allow things like Ogerpon. It's able to allow things like even Iron Hands, which is kind of slow. Things like these middling speed tier mons to just outspeed and like get rid of a lot of faster threats, which has just completely turned the metagame on its head. Like, the innovation of Icy Wind Chen Pao has basically revolutionized the tier in I think what a lot of players would say for the worse. And I think this is like a really interesting example of Chen Pao in action, especially. Like, we don't even see Madara's Chen Pao come out this game because it ended early, but I think we would have seen a very interesting and probably, like, it probably would have come down to luck game between Madara and Anne if Anne had not timed out. But yeah, so this was the, in my opinion, most interesting game that I've seen in SCL so far. And I just wanted to talk about it and nerd out about it because I thought it was really interesting, and I thought the positions in the late game and the end game were really deep. And there were so many like possible lines for either player that I can totally understand why Anne would time out in this position, especially with the pressure that you would feel from SCL. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed the video. This is the Jeff K YouTube channel. Signing off. GG.